All righty, welcome back, everybody. I apologize for the a little bit of a delay. Episode 21 coming at you. The NFL season, specifically Buffalo Bills season, is a week away today. Training camp kicks off in 7 days this morning. And with that being said, I had to bring in the big guns when it comes to Bills coverage, NFL talk. If you guys are Bills fan, you should be familiar with his work. His written portion should be over at Syracuse.com. Obviously, if you guys are familiar with the Shout Football podcast, Matt Parrino joining me this morning. Matt, how you doing? Thanks for joining me.
I'm good, Cole. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Awesome. So, like I was mentioning offline, a lot of my viewers on here will be familiar with our CFL-related kind of content and stuff like that. But with the NFL season coming up, like I was mentioning, I wanted to kind of selfishly, people will have plenty of coverage coming from you guys this training camp and all that sort of stuff, especially with other Bills content creators. But selfishly, and not even selfishly just for myself, but there is Matt, I'm sure you know about the power of Bills Mafia, but there's tons of Bills fans up here in Canada, especially in the CFL community, even in the kind of northwest region here in my province of BC and stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to get you on here and do a little bit of a training camp primer. Obviously, you'll be boots on the ground and have everything all covered next week. So I kind of wanted to get myself a little bit more prepared. Obviously, have you on here and be able to talk one-on-one with you and kind of just deep dive into kind of what the Bills got going on here in a week or so going into camp. Sound good with you?
Sounds good.
Awesome. So let's get into the camp battle, into the meat. I'm sure what kind of you've been asked about all off season. And the biggest question for me, let's start with the linebacker room. I'm curious, Matt, what do you think when it comes to the competition? Obviously, there is a big hole with Tremaine Edmunds leaving to Chicago beside Matt Milano this year. I'm curious for you, do you see this? Obviously, it seems like it's an open competition, but in your opinion, do you think this is more of a three-man competition with Terrell Dotson, Terrell Bernard, and then potentially AJ Klein kind of being that failed safe, or do you truly think this is a five-man competition with Dorian Williams, Baylon Spector maybe being involved in there as well? My kind of what I kind of hesitate to maybe it being a five-man competition is just with it being training camp and the only limited amount of first-team reps. Obviously, the limited amount of first-team reps that'll come in the preseason games and then as well in training camp practice. So in your opinion, what do you think it's going to come down to when it comes to the linebacker competition?
My feelings are, Tyrell Dotson obviously knows the system, and I feel like he's going to be the most comfortable out there in a lot of spots because he knows it. He's played it. This is his big opportunity. With that said, they spent a third-round draft pick on Terrell Bernard 2 years ago, and then this year they spent a third-round draft pick on Dorian Williams. I think both of those guys are going to get a crack at this thing. I think AJ Klein, you already know what you have in him. Like if you get to late August and none of those other three guys have really asserted themselves, or maybe, a flyer on a Baylon Spector, if he has a really good summer, maybe can get into the mix there. You can put AJ Klein out there and be okay. But I think they want to try to transition to one of these younger pieces. And I'm not counting out Dorian Williams. If I was put the hierarchy right now, I think I'd have Terrell Bernard a little bit ahead of Tyrell Dotson because, again, a guy that they drafted, a guy that they're developing and maybe wanting to give him an opportunity. He's taking a big jump. I talked to Bobby Babich, the linebackers coach, Terrell Bernard, during minicamp and OTAs, and he talked about how amazing it was just to go from year one to year two in terms of how much the game slowed down. And so if he's operating out there, recognizing things a little bit more, playing faster, that's going to put him in a better position. And then Dorian Williams, they drafted him because of the speed, right? The coverage ability. And that's one of the areas, as good as Tremaine Edmunds was for the Bills the last couple of years, I think the one hole you could poke in his game was, some of the coverage lapses at times. I know a lot of people talked about, signaling and recognition in the run game and reading blocks. That was something. But I thought in big games against really good offenses, coverage-wise, he was just too big to cover the amount of field that some of these smaller slot receiver, wide receiver, tight ends can kind of put defenses in a bind with. So I think that's what Dorian Williams is, completely the opposite of Edmunds. He's a smaller, compact guy, explosive speed, maybe could be a little bit of an answer in the coverage part of things. And listen, we can maybe get to the season and then them sprinkle in some type of rotation. Sean McDermott has been willing to do that year after year after year. I mean, you start with Cody Ford, Spencer Brown was doing it for a little while on the defensive side, obviously Kaiir Elam, Levi Wallace before him, Dane Jackson. They're not afraid of that. So if somebody doesn't go ahead and win this job, earn this job, it wouldn't be surprising to me if they did a kind of a game plan specific thing and mixed and matched.
Thank you, Matt. I apologize. It's still early over here. That's going to be something that's intriguing for me. I wish I was in Rochester to attend training camp, but I would imagine most Bills fans are going to have all eyes on the linebacker position and kind of seeing what's going on in there in individual portion, especially in team portion when they get into team 11 on 11 and all that sort of stuff. It'll just be really, really interesting to see kind of who comes out of there with the starting position, I guess. In your mind, would you think kind of Terrell Dotson is kind of the easy first preseason game against the Colts, I believe, here in a few weeks to probably most likely start that game?
Yeah, probably. But again, it's hard because most starters don't play. So if Dotson starts and plays, do we sit there and say that he's the odds-on favorite? Because, Tremaine Edmunds would have never played in that game. Matt Milano won't play in that game. So I think we're going to have to just take the cues from the coaching staff. And listen, you're going to have to read between the lines. We can't report who is, taking the first team reps during camp. You'll be able to kind of see it with the way that observations are written, like certain plays against first team, like caliber players. And you just got to, listen to who we're talking about. Like if Terrell Bernard or Dorian Williams are stuck on the third team, they're probably not going to get a lot of run on my post-game podcast. So yeah, I think Dotson probably ends up getting the first action in the preseason game again, because he's the veteran of the group and probably knows the defense the best, but I don't necessarily know if that's an indication that he's definitely the odds-on favorite to win the job.
Yeah, you and Joe Marino, you guys do a good job of kind of leaving those little nuggets in your guys' notes and stuff like that about maybe he was lined up with a third team guy or whatever. So shout out to you guys, Matt. And we Bills fans definitely appreciate those little tidbits and those nuggets in there. But you mentioned it, rotation. I'm curious at the guard position. I'm curious who you see. I would imagine Connor McGovern is kind of going to probably take hold of that left guard position, is kind of what everyone is most likely assuming. At right guard, who do you see? What do you see happening there? Obviously, the O'Cryus Torrence pick in the second round. We have a guy that's been around, very comfortable starter in Ryan Bates. And then obviously David Edwards comes over from LA in the offseason. You mentioned rotation with the linebackers, that maybe you wouldn't be even surprised if the linebackers were to rotate. Do you see any sort of rotation at guard with O'Cryus Torrence, kind of similar to the way they handled Cody Ford early in his career?
I don't know. I think if he doesn't win the job, he'll be a depth player for a while. And then once he does come far enough to be able to play on a down-to-down basis, which, listen, I'm projecting him to win the job. I mean, you drafted him in the second round. He's pretty much considered the top guard to come out of the draft this past year. So if you look at some recent examples, like in the division and more so in the conference, like the Kansas City Chiefs are a perfect example. They spent a second round draft pick on Creed Humphrey. They spent a late day 3 pick on Trey Smith. They got him in the lineup. They started him. They played him. I think guys need to play. The 4-year rookie contract is such a short window. You have to learn what you have in a player sooner rather than later. And, these guys, first and second round picks, they got to be able to come out and at least be able to hold their own. And I think the upside of Torrence is worth at any growing pains you're going to experience early in the season, especially with the strength now you should have on the left side of the line from left tackle all the way to center. So I think Torrence is going to win the job. That's just my gut feeling after kind of taking a look at him in the spring, knowing where they drafted him. But if he doesn't, that's why they have Ryan Bates. I mean, the guy is as versatile as it comes. He could be your first off the bench. He could be your backup center. He could be your starting right guard, left guard, center. They have options.
They do have options. I'm not a fan of the whole rotation. I think that just kind of doesn't help a player kind of get into the feel of things. You get out there for maybe 10, 12 snaps in a series, and then you're yanked for maybe, depending on how long those series goes. I think it just kind of it doesn't fully allow the athlete to kind of get going and feel themselves in a game, specifically with the O-line. You kind of have to feel yourself out throughout a game and all that sort of thing. So I'm curious, and I think kind of what you were alluding to there, it kind of frees up the rest of the offensive line, looking up the other depth pieces. Besides Ryan Bates, we don't really have another depth center other than maybe like a Greg Mans, who I would imagine is more of like a practice squad type candidate. I would think if O'Cryus Torrence is able to start, hopefully then Ryan Bates is able to kind of be backup center / guard. You're able to probably be first man off the bench, the sixth lineman, and then you do have someone as well like a David Edwards, even an Ike Butker, which is crazy. Ike Butker has definitely given us some meaningful snaps here in the past years, and he might be turned into a depth piece, which would be awesome for an offensive line. Moving to, I would say probably the second most intriguing camp battle going into this summer would be the cornerback position. I'm curious how you see, I know you're a big believer in kind of Kaiir Elam and letting him see fully what he's got. What do you see happening with the cornerback position and even some of the guys that they have kept around in a Dane Jackson, bringing over a Cam Dantzler? What do you see come week one and who's maybe starting opposite of Tre'Davious White?
I think it's truly an open competition. I mean, I don't think Sean McDermott at this point is going to shy away from playing the best player that he thinks gives him the best chance to win. Even if someone like me who covers the team but has never played football, has never coached football, thinks that Kaiir Elam should just get the job just because you spent the draft capital on him. And I don't necessarily – here's my thing. If Christian Benford or Dane Jackson, whoever it is, if there's that much of a difference between Elam and one of those two players, fine. I can understand that logic in going with a player that you just think is that much better, but I just don't know if that's necessarily the case. Now, if they're projecting saying, okay, we're going to play Benford because we think he can be this good, where it seems like Kaiir Elam is still struggling with this, and this, which is going to preclude him from reaching this level. Okay, I can even understand that too. But my understanding and listening to Kaiir Elam talk is like the repetitions are what really allowed him to get more comfortable last year. And he has big play potential. Like, I don't care what you say. Like, a lot of people talk about, like, if you go watch his full body of work, it wasn't always great. Sure, it wasn't always great. But the amount of times it was bad, to me, it didn't really stick out. And he had a couple high-end plays. So I want to just lean into that if I'm the coaching staff. But again, I don't get paid millions of dollars to coach football. So we'll see what they ultimately decide on. I think Dantzler is like a wild card because if he comes in and has a great preseason training camp, they love him in the building. I think that could put Dane Jackson in a spot where they can maybe look to flip him for a day 3 pick. I mean, starting cornerback or cornerbacks with starting experience, that yields a return usually in this league. So if you can get a 5th or a 4th for a guy that you're probably going to have to give Levi Wallace money to next year, coming off of the restricted free agent money that he got this year, I think you look to move in that direction, knowing what you have in Benford and then Elam.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think something that you alluded to, we've seen him make a few flash plays. I think right away to the Kansas City game, Mahomes and the Chiefs are driving into the red zone there. He tries to put a ball up into the end zone. For the most part, a 50-50 ball, and Kaiir Elam comes away with it. So I think it was nice to see those opportunities when he was given live reps and he was making some plays. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, but you listen to him on something like the Cover One film room that he was on, I believe, last week with those guys, and you really hear him talk about kind of how he's a student of the game and kind of how he I just feel like he needs a little bit more opportunity on the field, and hopefully that comes this season. Hopefully he's able to just outright win the job, and we don't have to argue in the fan base anymore. And hopefully week 1 he is starting and never removed after that. So interested to see what happens with that. I'm curious, transitioning a little bit out of the playing side with Sean McDermott. Obviously, we get the move. Leslie Frazier is stepping away for the year. We get a little bit of a weird, out of nowhere, Leslie Frazier leaves the team. I'm curious, how much do you see things changing with Sean McDermott play calling now, and how that maybe he alluded to it a little bit, how his roles will change for the team on game days and all that sort of thing, even in training camp practices as well?
I think like a lot of the game day sideline stuff, outside of actually calling the defense, he'll probably have that delegated out. He's got a really experienced staff. I mean, they promoted Eric Washington to assistant head coach, having a defensive assistant, senior defensive assistant like Al Holcomb. I mean, that's a real luxury for the team. And then you got Bobby Babich, John Butler with a load of experience. And there's experienced coaches all along the defense. So they'll figure out the game day stuff. To me, it's just like Sean being back in the thick of the defensive part of the game. Not that he ever was away from it. Even when Leslie was calling the defense, I'd imagine he was very heavily involved. But it's just a different animal when you're strategically thinking about reacting to what the offense is doing, and how much can you then be in the moment game day stuff when the offense has the ball. So I don't know. It might be an opportunity for Ken Dorsey to really grow this year and take the next step in his development. And Sean always talks about that. I mean, he's a young play caller, young offensive coordinator. I wonder if, and this probably won't happen because he's been up there and, it seems like he's comfortable, but I wonder if Ken Dorsey doesn't end up coming back down on the sideline and maybe operating in more of like, all right, I'm going to run the offense in the battle. He was used to that. I mean, down on the sideline as a quarterback's coach, I mean, you saw him, with the headset on, moving back and forth between, the line of players and then the quarterback's bench there where Josh Allen and them sit. So, I mean, I was thinking about that last year. Like maybe when you get into a rut, maybe going back to what being up top is nice because you could kind of survey the field and see a little bit more. But I mean, being in it too, I think there's benefits to that. And now that McDermott's going to be so involved in the defense, I'm very intrigued to see how this ends up playing out. But one thing is for sure, I think you're going to see the most aggressive version of the Bills defense that you've seen in the McDermott era. I think that they're moving away from a little bit more of a passive bend but nope, don't break approach. There'll be elements of that still. They do that really well. But I think from a pressure perspective, from what they do with their linebackers, Taron Johnson is maybe a blitzer a little bit more. I think that they can get really aggressive. And I think that when healthy, they have the potential to have the best defensive line that there's been in Buffalo since McDermott's been here.
And I think when you have when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen as well, I think you can kind of afford to be a little bit of aggressive. Maybe you give up a big player, a big touchdown, they get into scoring position. I think you got to maybe trust your offense that if we have to win in a shootout, let's win in a shootout. Let's win that way. And let's hope that we can maybe generate some pressures, generate some turnovers, and maybe it's a lopsided victory for us if we're able to the aggressive side is able to pay off for us. So I'm curious I'm more so curious on how the delegating, I guess, kind of works its way out in the coaching staff with when the defense comes up, like you're alluding to, when the defense comes out the field and there's adjustments to be made. But also he's got to kind of game manage if there's maybe a play that he wants to challenge, or maybe it's 2 minutes and he has the timeouts. He's the one that's in charge of the timeouts, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm most intrigued about when it comes to McDermott taking over the defense. You touched on Dorsey and Josh a little bit. I'm curious. You touched on it on your live at Wingnuts on Sunday. I tell you, Matt, watching those back, very jealous not being in the Buffalo area. Looks like a ton of fun. Looks like just a really good vibe. Josh Allen. Don't really need to say much about Josh Allen. I think I'm not one of those crazy Bills fans that kind of get worked up over the turnovers. I think that kind of just comes with Josh Allen. I'd love to obviously see that come down a little bit, but I think Josh is obviously Patrick Mahomes, I think is in kind of that tier of his own, but Josh Allen is as an elite quarterback as they come in the NFL. So I'm just happy that we have a great quarterback. We have a quarterback that's on the cover of Madden. We have a quarterback who's in the MVP conversation. So I didn't want to spend too much time on here, but you had a little bold prediction Sunday about Josh Allen. I believe it was 5,000 yards. I forget the amount of touchdowns, but I'm curious for you, Matt. I guess you do see Josh Allen, but what's the next level for Josh Allen? Would it just be for you kind of taking down those turnovers a little bit more, or do you kind of truly believe in 5,000 yards would be attainable for Josh Allen in the season?
Yeah, I think with the way that they're approaching this season with him and how he's approaching it with himself, I think that there's an active awareness for the hits that he takes. And there's listen, a lot of it comes off script. I mean, that's part of what makes him special. But I think it's like the designed aspect of things. Like there's a way with the talent that he has as a thrower to turn this offense into one that leans on him as a passer. And I think they went out and they gave him the specific designed weapons to make him more comfortable being back there. You could survey, you have options now. You have the deep threat in Gabe Davis. You have the ace number one in Stephon Diggs. You have Dawson Knox, who could do a little bit of everything, right? And then you have Dalton Kincaid, who's supposed to be this slot / short intermediate area fix to the offense. I mean, the way that evaluators talk about Kincaid and his upside, I mean, listen, the comparisons to Travis Kelce are always scary when you're talking about a guy that's the best player at the position to ever play the game. But I do like the comparison when it comes to what Travis Kelce excels at. If Dalton Kincaid can even get to that world somehow of defenses knowing the ball's going to him, Travis Kelce, that is, doing everything they can to stop him, setting up their defense to stop him, and him just finding a way to get open. That's kind of what Kincaid did at Utah because there wasn't a lot of talent around him. That one game, that USC game, I've watched the tape back on that multiple times. And it's unbelievable as the game goes on. To Brandon Beane's observation when he talked about him after the draft, he said he turned to executives on the table that were watching this tape with him and said, guys, did you just screw up? Did you just run the same play back over again? And they're all like, no, he's doing this over and over again, even though the defense knows it's coming. And USC, while it wasn't an elite team, I mean, that was a definitely step up in competition for Utah. So I think Kincaid, maybe not right away in year one in 2023, or maybe not even at the start of the season, but by the end of the year when he gets comfortable and you have to figure about all these other players in this offense. I haven't even mentioned a Trent Sherfield who was underappreciated, I think, in that Miami offense last year. And listen, when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, the third guy is most likely going to eat, but I saw a lot of good stuff with him. That play against San Francisco, when he took it, I think it was 3 or 4 yards from Tua and took it to the house. That's big time run after the catch. Deontay Hardy, if he could stay healthy, he's a chess piece. I mean, he is a weapon. You could do multiple things with him. And then, oh, by the way, I think Khalil Shakir is the plan at number 2 wide receiver. If they can't come to an agreement with Gabe Davis before the season, he takes off and then, he earns too much as a free agent next year after a contract year. Khalil Shakir, I think they'd be more than comfortable going on with him as wide receiver too, because he's following that Gabe Davis track right now. So, I think Josh Allen has a lot of weapons. I think the run game is going to be better. I think the offensive line is better. And because of that, I think he could be a little bit more of a consistent and just rely upon the passing game a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how he comes back. I think there is a little bit of a chip. I hope he's hearing what Patrick Mahomes is saying. A few of these quotes that have been coming out in the offseason. Not that they're personal shots, but Mahomes saying that they would rather they match up better with Cincinnati. I believe he said that kind of thing. I think Josh should kind of use those. I think they love to use that at One Bills Drive. I think Sean McDermott's a very big bulletin board material guy, and I think that kind of the team can kind of adopt a little bit more of a hunted mentality this year instead of being the hunter. Obviously, last year, everyone picking them coming into the season to win it all. I'm curious. Use this mentality, the little bit of an underdog, chip on the shoulder type feel to them, and really use it to their advantage. Obviously, I think going into week 1, the Jets will be on Hard Knocks. I'm going to be surprised. I think already yesterday on NFL Network, some people were picking the Jets to win the division. I'm curious how the game will be favored and what the point spread will be week 1. And if the Bills go into New York, the underdog, that would be awesome for me because I would imagine that will be used big time during game week. A couple quick hitters here, Matt, before we get out of here. I'm curious, who would be a player who surprises people out of camp for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if he'll surprise. I think he's on most hardcore Bills fans' radar for sure. But a guy that I think people are going to get really familiar with is Poona Ford. I feel like he is a guy that he's in that Daquan Jones mode where you go out and you get a guy, second or third wave of free agency. I think actually they got Jones a little bit earlier than that, but Ford this year, kind of after all of the big names were taken. And he kind of just hung around. But what he's going to be asked to do is fill a very specific and important hole that the Bills had on their defensive line. I like Jordan Phillips a ton. I think he's a fun player. I think he's an exciting player. I think he's a really good player. He's unreliable. The guy gets hurt all the time. So if you have to go into the season with him as DT3, you're just in a tough spot. Like, I think the perfect place for Jordan Phillips is DT4/5, where if he stays healthy and he can be a part of the rotation, you're all of a sudden now talking about an elite defensive line like they had a couple years ago when he led the team in sacks. What Ford gives you is the ability to potentially unlock Ed Oliver a little bit, right? Like when Daquan Jones comes off the field, they've had to put Jordan Phillips in. They've had to put who was banged up last year, Tim Settle, who really didn't have a great first year. And I think that there's some ceiling and upside for him this year. But Poona Ford is a guy that could start. If you didn't have Daquan Jones on this roster and you were lining up Poona Ford next to Ed Oliver, I think you feel really good about him. So knowing that he's that DT3, that's really exciting. I think he's going to have a really strong summer. He's going to make some noise. And so I think he's a guy that, and another guy is Poyer and Hyde are back. And I know that Taylor Rapp probably doesn't have a starting job to start, but coming over after all the experience that he had with the Rams, I think they're going to find a way to get this guy in the field. And I think because of Poyer and Hyde's age, it's going to be Taylor Rapp's summer, right? Like he's going to probably be working in with the ones a lot because, just to save, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer both got hurt during training camp last year. Remember, Hyde took that really bad fall going up to try to intercept a pass and he missed a couple days. Poyer started the elbow injury during training camp. So yeah, these guys got to get dialed up. They got to get ready to revved up. But I think they want to try to keep them on ice as much as possible to get them to the start of the season so they're healthy for the actual football, which could mean that Taylor Rapp gets a lot of time, plus to learn the defense still. Like he's coming over into a new scheme. He's got to learn this thing. If one of those guys goes down, he's got to be as comfortable as possible. So those two guys, I think, could have big roles this season, even though going in, they're not penciled in or have a chance to be a starter right from the jump. All
right. And the flip side of that question, Matt, who would be, in your mind, the biggest disappointment maybe coming out of camp going into week 1?
That's hard to project because there's some guys that, have some work to do. What I could say, Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa, both have, this is a very important summer for both of those guys, right? And so I think, if we get to post-camp, post-preseason, and one of those guys gets traded, maybe AJ Epinesa, even if there's no trade market, gets cut. Like, dude, Shaq Lawson, go back and watch last season. Like, he was consistent. He was solid. If he ends up being DE4 for the Bills or DE3 until Von Miller comes back and then slots into that DE4 role, it's a former first-round pick. That's a luxury. The guy, he shows up to play. He's great against the run. He gives you some occasional juice as a pass rusher. He's going to put a lot of pressure on these other guys, and they love Kingsley Jonathan. I put in my roster projection, I had them cutting Shaq Lawson only because I thought that they can get him on the practice squad, and then keeping Kingsley Jonathan and not putting him up to get cut and trading AJ Epinesa. Those are all, I think, viable results to preseason training camp. So we'll see how it plays out. I just think that AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham, they gotta flip a switch, and it's got to happen on game day. It can't just happen. AJ Epinesa was fire in training camp last year. Can't just be that. It's got to transition to the games. I know he had 6.5 sacks last year, but it didn't feel like that watching the games every week. So we'll see. And I think the coaching staff knows that. Eric Washington was not critical of those guys, but there's some meat on the bone, right? That's the term that they love to use in the Bills coaching staff. So I think that to me, I'm watching that defensive line group towards the end of the depth chart in terms of not having a disappointing summer and knowing that they have a little pressure, a little heat on them.
Yeah, a couple days before cut down, all eyes, I would imagine, will be on AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham. If they were to maybe have not the camp that they wanted, I would imagine there'll definitely be some, hopefully, phone calls made about maybe some deals potentially involving them. I guess to kind of close things out here, Matt, to get kind of more of a general kind of feel for the team. How do you see this team responding after all the chaos from last year? Just everything with last year. We don't have to get into it. Now going into this year, like I kind of mentioned, a little bit of the hunted or the hunter. Just how do you see this team responding going into this year and how they come out of the gates?
I think they're probably pissed on several different levels. I mean, Sean McDermott has faced more criticism nationally than this offseason than he probably did his whole tenure. Like, sure, 13 seconds happened, but the Josh Allen part of that and the offense, how electric of a game it was, he faced scrutiny, but it was different. Like, people weren't calling for his job. Like, there's national people saying that Sean McDermott is on the hot seat. I think that's kind of crazy, but the guy just got an extension, and I do think that in the building with ownership, he is in a very healthy place. I mean, he's built this thing into a perennial playoff contender. And to be honest with you, if you go back to 2017 when they were looking for a coach, if you laid out the resume that McDermott's built over the last 6 seasons in that job search, right? Every single Bills fan, every single critic, pundit, whatever, would sign up for what he's delivered in these 6 years. And I'm critical of McDermott at times. Like, I think he's a little bit too buttoned up, like all these reporting protocols that they have and how secretive they are. I think it's a little bit overboard. But you know what? The proof's in the pudding, man. Like, they've been successful. And this was an organization that didn't reach playoffs for 17 years. So for as much as I think it's, I could poke holes in the model has been super successful. So I think he's going to come out this year. You're going to see the Carolina version of Sean McDermott as a defensive play caller. I think this defense ends up being one of the tops in the league again, but truly one of the tops in the league. Not one of those ones that, feast on bad quarterbacks and then in the playoffs, it kind of just, it becomes harder. I think that that's going to, maintain when the games get harder. And then I think this offense, like, listen, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, they need to come to Jesus situation here. And maybe it happened during mini camp. Maybe it's still to come, but they got to come together and realize, listen, these windows are so short in this league. You have a chance with a loaded roster, an improved offensive line to really make a run at a Super Bowl. And I think that they're going to do that. And I think that this is a stronger Super Bowl contender this year than they were a year ago, just from a roster perspective. And that's not counting the fact that everybody, it seems, is counting them out, not only in the division or in the conference, but in the division, which is crazy. I think there's questions in New York. I think there's questions in Miami. And I think New England's going to be tougher than everybody's giving them credit for. So it's a really tough division, but the Bills have navigated that the last couple of years and still found a way to win it. So it's going to be a fun year, man. Can't wait.
It is. I think I've benefited a little bit from living outside the fan base where things aren't turned up 24/7. So I don't really hear too much of that outside of Twitter. But for the first time in I would say since 2017, I guess, since McDermott hired. And it's kind of funny, actually, because it was a Dolphins fan and a Chiefs fan who asked me. But they asked me about Sean McDermott kind of, I want to say maybe in the spring or something like that. And they asked, you know, do you think the Bills would be better with an offensive head coach? And I was kind of like curious because we've been like, I believe in wins in the NFL. I think we're around like second or third when it comes to wins since McDermott's took over. I don't think people realize like how hard it is to go to the playoffs year after year and all that sort of thing. I think people just need to really enjoy this. Like you mentioned, 17-year drought. Enjoy this, people. We have a good team. People need things to talk about over a long season and tend to bring up the craziest of takes. So I try to tune those guys out and just tune into guys like you and that have reasonable takes and all that sort of thing. So just overall excited, Matt, for some football here. Obviously, I've been in not the middle. I would say it's 6 weeks into my CFL season, so it's been nice having some football to watch. But I might get a little bit of crap for saying this, but there is nothing like NFL season, nothing like Buffalo Bills season. So very excited for us to have some football to talk about. I would imagine a lot of Shout podcast here coming up in the next few weeks.
This is the best Shout season, man. Like the training camp shows are what I think fans enjoy the most because not everybody can be at training camp, especially right now, the way that the tickets, they limit the tickets and they're really hard to get. They go so fast. So for fans that can't get to St. John Fisher, we try to put you there in the podcast. And so we're excited about this time of year for sure.
And man, not to pump your guys' tires, you know that you guys literally are the best in the game for the Bills. If you guys are living under a rock, I guess I shouldn't say that because a lot of my viewers will be up here from Canada. So if you guys aren't familiar with what Matt and Ryan got going on, please, they got podcast, written stuff, Syracuse.com, NY Up. That's, I think, where Ryan is. And then obviously Shout Podcast. Get on that. It's Apple Podcast, YouTube. There'll be a lot of good content, I would imagine, coming out here in the next 7 days. Next Wednesday, I believe, training camp kicks off. So, Matt, really appreciate you joining me. Any final thoughts or maybe just let the people know where they can find your work, your and Ryan's work this summer?
Yeah, man. I'm at Matt Parrino on Twitter is the best place to find me. I'm over up on Threads too. If that thing takes off, we'll see. Same username. And that's where all the content comes out. Shout Bills podcast, like you mentioned, on all the platforms and all my written work over at Syracuse.com.
Awesome. Like I said, Matt, I really appreciate you joining me. You see, I try to be a regular. Obviously, the time difference is a little bit hard. Usually I'm at work a lot of the days when you guys are doing lives or spaces or all that stuff. But just from me, obviously, and this is not just from me, but very appreciative of all the work that you and Ryan do. And today, I guess I completed the cycle. I had Ryan on earlier in the off season. I completed the Shout cycle here. I had Ryan on, now Matt. So from me, and I would imagine from the Bills community up here in Canada, around the Pacific Northwest, we really appreciate all you do. And I guess not even just to single out us, everywhere outside of Buffalo, because you guys do a very good job of getting everyone kind of informed and feeling like they are in Buffalo. So I really appreciate everything you guys do, and I appreciate you jumping on here and joining me this morning, give me a little bit of your time.
Thanks, brother. Take care.
Awesome. If you guys enjoyed this, please be sure to like, comment, smash the like button like Matt and Ryan always do, but smash the like button, comment, subscribe, find us on Apple Podcasts. You can rate, review, and follow the channel. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Go Bills, and we'll see you guys on another episode of Coast to Coast Gridiron.